You know, Kelly, we talked about you talking about how a county bill becomes a law, as well as how it can evolve and what's important to council members. Then we will go to Mike, and he's going to talk about the committee structure and what's important to council members. And we're going to have Claire talk about effective lobbying and testimony. And I'm sure there'll be some overlap in some of these topics. So please start us off, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. Aloha kako, Maui County. So your Maui Council is here to serve the people, communities, and interests of the islands of Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and Kaho'olawe. And I wanted to mention that coincidentally, well before this seminar was announced, I had been working on creating a civic engagement video to give to residents and to develop some basic tools and information to stay informed, get involved, and let your voice be heard on issues of local government. The video effort was halted for a few weeks when the new chair took over, but we're back on it, and we hope to make it available to schools, community organizations, nonprofits, and others who know that civic engagement is of dire importance to our future. And it's now more than ever with all the stuff that's going on and with all of this social distancing. So my presentation today is going to start out with a few basics because I was told to assume that everybody's starting from square one. And I'm happy to answer questions later if there's anything that I left out due to time constraints. At the local level, our representatives are called council members, and our constitution is the Maui County Charter, which is this document that I was holding up earlier. And that lays out the structure of our government. In section 3-6, the charter establishes the county council as a legislative body for Maui County, and it also establishes the executive branch headed by the mayor and the various departments in the administration that the mayor oversees. The council makes laws and policies, and it's up to the administration to implement and enforce them. The council's policymaking is supposed to be guided by the countywide policy plan adopted into ordinance in 2010, which gives the framework for the direction of the county's future, including countywide goals, principles, and core values through the year 2030. So we talked about that earlier and how that should be really influencing the decisions we're making. As required by the county charter, the council meets twice a month and usually every other Friday to discuss and take action on key issues affecting the county and to learn through public testimony how members of the community feel about these issues. Council members also serve on committees dealing with specific subject matters that impact our quality of life. The purpose of the committees is to provide recommendations to the council on matters referred to the committee by the council. Council and committee meetings are open to the public. They usually are held in council chambers on the 8th floor of the county building, also called the Kalana o Maui building, located at 200 South High Street in Wailuku. Some meetings are held in various locations throughout the county to facilitate public outreach and participation. You can attend meetings in person and or watch them on Akaku Channel 53. You can also stream them online at akaku.org/channel-53. Live and archived websites are also available at mauicounty.us. And I want to stress that during this time of this COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Ige has suspended the Sunshine Law, and the council is moving to interactive meetings. So this is in order to have our budget deliberations while the county is in social distancing mode with everyone else. The council is currently experimenting with various ways of allowing for live testimony from the public via phone or video conference. I was hoping to have a link to share, but have been told we expect a press release providing guidance on the public's ability to participate in remote meetings to be issued next week. So we're still trying to work out the kinks on that. Okay, going into how laws are made at the county level. The council's law and policymaking process has several steps. The typical process starts when a council member, a county department, or perhaps a member of the public has an idea for a new law or for changing or amending an existing law. Or it could be a proposal for a resolution, which is typically a declaration that does not have the force and effect of law. Council members are usually aided in the process of drafting bills by our Office of Council Services, which includes 8 legislative analysts positions, 1 assigned to each committee. After a bill is drafted, it then goes to the Office of Corporate Counsel or corporation council, where it undergoes review for form and legality. And the bill would be stronger if it is signed by the corp council, but sometimes they come to the council without that signature because it may be taking too long, or there may be other issues. So this idea is written into a communication to the council chair, either by a council member, the mayor, or a department director, introduced at a council meeting, and then referred to the appropriate subject matter committee for further discussion and recommendations. The council can take action on the item at the council meeting without going to referral if there are 6 votes to waive the requirement of sending it to committee. But the usual process is to send it to committee for deliberation. The committee chair schedules a meeting to discuss and take public testimony on the issue. It then sends a report with its recommendations on the issue to the full council. The council chair places the item on an upcoming council meeting and to discuss and take public testimony on the issue. According to our council rules, and this is really important, the chair must schedule an item, any item coming from a council member, within 2 meetings after receiving that item. The committee chairs, however, are not held to this obligation. So the committee chairs get to decide what they put on their agenda and what they hold back. If it's a bill or law, it requires 2 separate discussions called readings at full council in order to pass. If it's a resolution, only 1 reading is required. With a majority vote, a resolution gets adopted, but a bill requires a 2nd reading and vote. Resolutions for charter amendments are an exception and do require 2 readings at full council. A summary of bills passed on first reading is published in the newspaper at least 3 days before the 2nd and final reading. When a bill passes 2nd and final reading by a majority vote of the council, it receives an ordinance number and it gets sent to the mayor, who then has 10 days to approve or veto the bill. If the mayor approves or takes no action within 10 days, the ordinance goes into effect. The council can also override a veto by the mayor with a 2/3 vote, which is 6 votes. Bills that do not pass first or second reading and vetoed bills can be referred back to committee, deferred, which means postponed to a later date, or filed, which means that ends the discussion and the bill is effectively killed. The same options of referral, deferring, or filing apply to resolutions. All passed ordinances are published in the newspaper and can also be found online. Ordinances are also compiled in the Maui County Code, also available online. So that's the process of going through local legislation and getting a bill passed. And I'm going to go into a little bit that I was asked to talk about on giving public testimony. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that things are changing too, and I'll get to that in a minute. But generally, your input and participation in the process helps make the work of the council more effective and responsive. And the meetings are open to the public and required by law to give you the opportunity for written and oral testimony for both council meetings and committee meetings. Again, we are operating now under an unprecedented procedure and only taking written or televised testimony until further notice. So we're awaiting that confirmation of what that process is going to be. Send your written testimony on any item on a council meeting agenda to the county clerk's office by email or fax. Send your written testimony on any item on a committee meeting agenda by fax or to the appropriate committee email address. Your written testimony should be received by noon on the business day preceding the meeting. If you plan to submit it at the meeting, it is helpful to bring 16 copies for staff to distribute at the meeting. You can testify in person on any agenda item, and in many cases, testifying in person has a bigger impact than written testimony. Council members appreciate the time and effort it takes to appear in person at a meeting. In this time of remote participation, in person means calling or logging on to testify at the meeting so we can still hear you from wherever you are, no matter where we are. It's also worth noting that written testimony submitted by email can include a link to a video of yourself or someone else commenting on proposed legislation. You can even ask the chair to consider playing the video during the meeting. Each testifier will be given an equal amount of time to speak. You need to identify if you are speaking for yourself, on behalf of an organization, or are a paid lobbyist. And then I'm not sure how this is going to affect people with disabilities, but generally with people with disabilities requiring special accommodations, we ask them to contact the county clerk's office for council meetings or the Office of Council Services for committee meetings, at least 3 businesses prior to ahead of time. And we can try to have an interpreter there if you have hearing issues. For regular meetings when emergency rules are no longer in place, you can also testify by phone from our district offices at the Hana Community Center in Hana, East Maui, the Lanai Community Center on Lanai Island, and the Mitchell Paoli Community Center complex on Molokai Island. Keep in mind that all forms of testimony are part of the public record. So any written testimony will be distributed to all council members, will be available for public review, and may be posted on the website. Public testimony can make a big impact on important issues and council actions. For example, members of the West Maui community coming out to support a ban on commercial ocean recreational activity played a significant role in getting that legislation passed unanimously. And testimony provided during budget meetings can really help the council make county funding decisions that make sense to the public. Preparation and practice can make giving testimony easier and more effective. And so, I highly encourage people to just do a verbal run through of your testimony. And I want to give you some helpful tips from my perspective, and I think many of the council members' perspective on what makes effective testimony. 1, state your position. Council members want to know if you are for or against an agenda item, if you have concrete ideas for moving forward, or if you just want to express your feelings on the matter. And so you can state that you don't have an opinion, but you just want to share your concerns. 2, testimony must relate to a specific item on the agenda, and testifiers should only address the council, not any particular member, person, or observers. 3, be concise. You usually have 3 minutes, so make the most of your time. Keeping your comments brief helps the council members understand and remember your points. It's important to distinguish facts, which should include references, from feelings. Your opinion is important, so please differentiate what you think from what you know. And so we know if it's coming from a point of research-based, or if it's the general popular opinion. 4, bring a summary. It's important to distinguish getting behind on myself. Bring a summary. A written summary of your comments allows the council members to reference your testimony later. You can also include supporting material or more details as attachments. 5, offer solutions if you have them. Expressing an understanding of the problem and sharing solutions in your testimony helps the council members solve problems. Often the best ideas come from the community members who have practical knowledge of the situation. And I have to say that this council, more than any other council I've watched or been a part of, seems to really take to heart the suggestions of testifiers. 6, be respectful and courteous to others. Although everyone may not agree, every viewpoint needs to be valued and respected. Testimony given in the spirit of aloha can be very compelling. The County Council standards of decorum are a set of rules and expectations to ensure a safe and respectful meeting environment. So you'll often see chairs just asking for people to settle down and not clap or not hold up signs, because that can be disruptive. And the intent of the chair is to make sure everybody is heard and everybody is valued and no one is intimidated. So these standards are for the benefit of everyone participating in the meeting. More than anything else, we appreciate your input and kokua. So we try to treat everybody as part of our ohana, because we know we're all in this together. So that's my presentation, and I'll take questions now or later if you want.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This is Albert, and I have a question for you.
Okay.
I've been multitasking as I'm helping to run this webinar. I don't know if you covered the lobbying side as much as the testimony side. Did you talk about lobbying?
I just talked about in terms of the requirement of stating if you are a lobbyist, if you're a paid lobbyist when you testify. But I think what that wasn't part of my list of, I didn't realize that was part of my list of what I was supposed to talk about. I think what you're talking about now is people who lobby individual council members.
Yes, that's right. If you're limited to 3 minutes and there's no opportunity for give and take, question and answer back and forth between the council member and the person or persons who are visiting them. In my experience, it's an opportunity to really explore a little deeper and have a good conversation. And then when you go up to testify, I think you can have better success. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. If you can get, not all council members are open to having these kinds of conversations. I have been meeting with most people at least once that come to see me or that ask for a meeting. And I think it's very effective. It's also a way that you can explore deeper some of the suggestions that people are making. And also for myself, I tend to have more of a give and take. And so most people who come to see me about issues will give me suggestions, but they'll also leave with a list of my suggestions to them. So, and I think I try to be helpful, and I've gotten really positive response about that, where people feel like they're empowered. And I think that's one of the responsibilities of council members, is to empower constituents.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Mike, would you care to tell us about the committee structure and also fill in on anything that you might have had some burning thoughts while Kelly was talking?
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Albert. Well, I appreciate doing the webinar here. It's a really great educational process for me and everyone else that's participating, because it's all about civic engagement and empowering yourselves to get involved with government. And we wonder why people don't get out there to vote. I think it's the responsibility of government to provide venues and opportunities for the public to engage and help shape their communities. Let me start off first with the committee makeups. Of course, you have 9 council members. 1 person is selected chair. The primary responsibilities of the chair is to oversee matters in the Office of Council Services and other administrative matters. Then the 8 other council members take on various roles with different committees. The committee I chair is the Governance, Ethics, and Transparency Committee, which oversees legal matters, boards and commission nominations, charter amendments, and of course, on occasion, some very high-profile issues like the Lahaina wastewater treatment facility controversy. So, just to name a few. A very high-profile committee currently right now, of course, is the Budget Committee, which is chaired by member Kiani Rollins Fernandez. We're about to accept the mayor's proposed budget, I believe, on March 25th. And that committee, of course, deals with all money matters related to the community, salaries and personnel for county government departments, and as well as grants for our various nonprofits and capital improvement projects. So it is certainly probably the busiest committee of all. The other committees, we have the Water and Infrastructure Committee chaired by member Sugimura, which deals with water as well as traffic-related infrastructure matters. Then you have the Land Use Committee, which is chaired by Tamara Paulton. And then the Affordable Housing Committee, which is chaired by Tasha Kama. And then the EAC Committee, which is the Environmental and Agricultural Committee, chaired by member Shane Senensi. And then, of course, Councilmember King chairs a committee that was just recently formed dealing with climatology, certainly a very timely and important subject these days. And then we have Ricky Okama chairing our Healthy Families Committees, which deals with human concerns and park-related issues. Committees are usually where the work really takes place. Upon the recommendation of the committees, when a proposed legislation is deliberated and voted on, it comes out of committee, assuming with either a recommendation to approve or disapprove. Generally, if something's disapproved, it dies in committees. If it passes, it will go on to the full council for a final vote. Now, we talked earlier about public testimony and the importance of it. Now, for example, if you have a measure in committee that you would like to see passed, and it does make it, but just by a slim vote to go on to the full council, I'd recommend that you still continue to testify as it gets to the council, because sometimes I've seen it happen. Council members change their votes when it gets to the council step. You're smiling over there, Albert, because you know that. So that's why it's really important to stay engaged with whatever issue that matters to you. Just dovetailing off of Kelly's comments about public testimony, I also wanted to add, make sure you conduct yourself in a very appropriate manner, follow the rules and regs that have been determined by the council chair and the council chamber. Most members might tune you out if you become very hostile, and it's okay to be emotional, but just don't get too hostile. And eventually we'll get back to those wonderful days, post-coronavirus, if you know what I mean. And I think what also matters is I personally like face-to-face testimony, because you feel the passion and the emotion of the testifier. It does, for me, make a difference. Yes, written testimony is good, faxes and everything else, but there's nothing like face-to-face communications, or at least even talking to your constituent over the phone. Now, you wanted me to also elaborate, if I'm correct, on what's important to the council members themselves. I believe most council members would agree that being responsive to your constituents, returning the phone calls, emails, letters. I see it as customer service, because we were elected by you, we're paid by you, so it's my personal feeling that we're here to serve you and not the other way around. I was watching an interesting movie the other night called V, I guess V for Vendetta, and one of the interesting passages in there said, government should be afraid of its people and not the other way around. People should not be afraid of their government. Government should be afraid of their people. And I take that to heart. As far as the process, the bill, how the bill moves through, I'd like to use an example of what Kelly had already elaborated on. The plastic bag legislation we had several years ago. It was something that I read online about what San Francisco was doing with regards to plastic reduction. And so with that, I put it out there, and then we had wonderful people from the community that became engaged, people like Marge Bonar. Then we had Lucianne from the Sierra Club, and of course we had Mike Ottman from the Surfrider Foundation, all giving their input and manao as this bill was going through committee. Now, it took several meetings for this bill to pass, and why committees are so important, because this is the place where you can vet out legislation to find out, to look at any unintended consequences, because sometimes if you rush legislation, that's not a good idea, because then you'll hit some bumps in the road with legal challenges, and then before you know it, you're back to square one. So sometimes it's better to take your time with legislation, and I know people get frustrated because of the time it takes for legislation to pass, but this is why it's important. You need to give the legislative body the time to deliberate and dot the proverbial I's and T's, and to make sure that there's no unintended consequences with the legislation. And so I think, one last thing I'd like to say is to all the constituents, don't be afraid to ask a question. I'm sure many of you were told by your elders that a stupid question is one that isn't asked. So ask the pertinent questions. Question your legislators. Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by them, because remember, they work for you and not the other way around. So I think that's one more thing I want to add about civic engagement. We're talking about boards and commissions earlier. If you're not successful at being nominated or confirmed to a board and commission, don't give up. Get involved with organizations out there, special interest groups, or you can also get involved with your community associations. Dick Mayer has done a wonderful job in organizing, creating this community association alliance where everybody from different communities know what's going on in each other's community. So I think that's a wonderful way of getting people involved, more engaged. So that's one way you can start. For myself personally, I was a public school teacher up until the year 2000. And for years, I'd always grumble about this and that with the government not doing this and that. And my wife finally told me, well, get involved in an association. So I got involved with the old Makwa Trial Main Street Association. And then later on, I took the leap of faith to run for public office, and was not successful the first time around, but my second time around, we got in, and I've been there since, after 2010, did an 8-year stint with Mayor Arakawa, and fortunately was elected again to office just recently in 2018. So whether it be contributing to your community as an elected official or just as a community association member, know that what you do is certainly important for our community and helps our community collectively move forward with how we address all of the issues for our county. And of course, growth is always an important issue in a place where we have limited land space, and we have to certainly be mindful of our environmental resources. So That in a nutshell is where I'm coming from at this point. I don't know if I've run out of time already, Albert. If I'm just talking too much, let me know.
Long time ago, Mike. No, just kidding.
Okay. Well, that's why I love politics, Albert, because the bottom line is just meeting people. That's what it's supposed to be about, just meeting people. The people I know today, I would not have known if it were not for politics or just getting involved with community associations and other special interest organizations. So it's important for us to keep engaged with each other, and especially as we go through a crisis like this with the coronavirus.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding about the time, Mike. I want to drill down a little bit. I want to ask, so if you are sitting in your council seat, you're going into a meeting and you really are kind of undecided, what kind of testimony during the session would tend to make an impact on you that might make you want to change your vote?
Well, provide me the best available information and evidence as possible to not only myself or to the other council members as well. The Lahaina wastewater matter, that was a very important one. I mean, honestly, I was really torn. I mean, there are good arguments on both sides, but I decided to take a stand and go with what I believed at the time was the best available information to make the decision that I made. And which I guess goes back to what I said earlier. Don't give up on a matter that, that maybe made it out of committee or gets deferred. Still continue to be engaged with your elected officials and gather up the data. And why it's important I feel it's important to get public information or input from the public is sometimes elected officials were not aware of what's out there. You may be more akamai or more aware of the issue itself than the elected officials. So that's why it's very important for public officials to be receptive to information from the public, because I've known public officials who believe they think they know everything and the public doesn't know. I mean, that's their kuleana. I'm of the mindset of I welcome information and data from the public because, I don't think anybody knows everything there is to know with every issue.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to Kelly now. Now, in the legislative session, we talked about gut and replace. I don't think that exists at the county level. Could we talk about how a bill can be changed? Are there any tricks that that council members have used in the past where the intent of a bill might come out differently or change a lot?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to speak to any tricks that might have been used before I got on the council, but certainly there was a surprise meeting thrown in at the end of my previous term to try to pass some legislation before the end of the term, before some people were leaving the council, who either didn't run again or didn't get reelected. It was a meeting. There was an outcry from the public about that meeting being held, and some of us who just didn't agree with it didn't attend that meeting, but they had a quorum, so they were able to pass some bills through. But as far as gut and replace, that doesn't exist because the council is subject to sunshine law, which means we have to do everything, as transparently as possible. We can't make substantive changes without public input, and so we can pass something out of committee. We can make some small changes at the first council reading, but if there's any changes other than grammar or spelling, between the first and second readings, it has to go back to committee. So that we don't have that opportunity for a gut and replace at the council level.
Well, that to me sounds like one of the advantages of the sunshine law. A lot of times we hear about the disadvantages, like I think it's more than 2 council members. They can't go to a meeting, otherwise they have to run out.
There are some things that could be fixed about it, but in general, it wasn't created to hamper us. It was created to make sure that the public has the most opportunity to be a part of the local government. So right. I don't see the sunshine law as a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing that the state legislature doesn't have to adhere to it, and we do.
Yeah.
But I do think there's some things that could be fixed about it that could make it easier for us to, 5 or 6 of us want to attend an informational meeting where we're not going to be talking to each other. We're just going to be taking in information. That should be allowed. If we want to go to celebration or, you know, some kind of an honorary meeting. We
Like a
should be able to
political
do
form
that
of social distancing.
without being, yeah. It's kind of interesting now because I almost think that this social distancing, what's going to happen on the council, where everybody's going to have to testify remotely, may just be the great equalizer, because now all testimony is going to come in written. So we're going to have to weigh it all the same. Whereas right now we kind of give in-person testimony more weight. So I would say some things are going to get equalized out with this new way of doing business.
Don't you think that the council or the county could, I mean, they have the Blue Jeans video conferencing program. Why can't they use that for people to testify from their homes?
Well, we are trying to work that out, and hopefully either Blue Jeans or Zoom. The other counties are using Zoom, and you know, we had decided we were going to use Blue Jeans. And as I was preparing for this presentation, and I was looking up to figure out how people would get on Blue Jeans ahead of, you know, register ahead of time so that they could testify more easily, I found that it's not free. It costs you $10 to register for Blue Jeans, and so that may not work.
No.
So that you know, so anyway, that still needs to be vetted, because we cannot be charging people to testify.
Yeah, no, we have to pay as the organization putting on the webinar, but it's a pretty reasonable cost.
Right.
Okay. Unless you want to weigh in on those, Mike, do you want to weigh in on that at all?
As far as the sunshine law, yeah, it has its benefits, but there are some disadvantages, as Kelly had mentioned, or inconveniences, I should say. You know, where you look at the state legislature, they're not subject to the sunshine law, whereas we on a lower level of government, we're subjected to that. So it seems kind of unusual that we're subjected to that, but as far as the gutting and, you know, committee chairs have a lot of power, but maybe not as much power as the committee chairs at the state level. Certainly, as a committee chair, you have the authority to put whatever you want on your agenda. So if there's a constituent that wants a particular issue put on your agenda, a committee chair can, it depends on how, what your relationship is with that committee chair, he or she can say, well, this is not a priority for me. It may be a priority for you, but I've got other matters I'd like to put on the agenda. I've heard stories of where the committee chair for that particular term didn't even put any particular items from the community on his or her agenda because they felt that it was not their priority. So I think it's important that as a constituent, you try to do your best to establish a good, positive relationship with the council member that could be overseeing a matter that's important to you. So I don't like seeing committee chairs doing that personally. I mean, you're there to work, and whether you agree with the issue or not, put it on your agenda, at least hold a hearing on it, and you know, whatever happens, happens after that. But it's unfortunate you do have people in power that try to bury items that they don't like or they don't personally like and want to see. I prefer to operate from the point of, hey, you know what, I'll give it a hearing. I may not agree with it, but at least I'll give it its day in court, so to speak. Let's have a hearing for it and go from there.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So it's 1:38. We're supposed to go till 1:45, and that includes our Q&A. So, but it's been a great discussion. I think we're going to move to Claire. Are you ready, Claire? The question for Claire is, what do you do to make your lobbying and/or testimony more effective?
I think the best testimony comes with a mixture of personal experience, facts, and a solution. I do always try to think of how my testimony could result in something moving forward in the issue. So I find that the most compelling testimonies really are the ones with the greatest personal stories. I don't know if the council people agree to that, because sometimes people, yourself included, have very good and pointed facts, and those are very important. But as John Q. Public, I may not have the same depth of knowledge, but I think this is where the council members I have seen in this year especially have assisted me in finding the right laws or the right language to put my thoughts into that could lead to something that changes. I did want to, if you have time, I did want to just give a personal experience of all of the things that we've been talking about interacting with the county council and making laws. And that is in 2017, the sand mining moratorium was put on the agenda of the infrastructure committee by Ellie Cochran. And what ensued from that was a very volatile process of public testimony. And we, in total, I think, testified for about 10.5 months, every 10 days. But that, of course, was suspended during the budget hearings. There were times when council, and the very last minute, 2 or 3 members would say they were sick or they couldn't come, and there was no quorum. So that was very disheartening to us who have been working just as hard on the bill to get it passed, and to see that an unusual usage of power to make it so that there would be no quorum for a meeting. And I believe that is why it took so long to pass the moratorium, which did pass. And during the time that the moratorium was on, along came 2 other bills which related to it, and it was brought out in the Land Use Commission. And one was, I'd say, number 1 is a good bill. It addressed some of the problems with interagency regulation of the permits, of the grading permits, which allowed sand mining. And the second one I call the bad one, and that is the redefinition of natural resources. And those 3 were moving through the council at the same time. The 2 bills that went through land use had to go to the planning commission, where, just as you said, they needed to go to each planning commission to get the planning commission's viewpoint on these bills. And what I found is Bill 2, the bad one, was going through the planning commissions, and the day that we passed the sand moratorium, 2 days later, it went to the first planning commission, which is Maui. The next 2 days it went to Molokai. And then I found out that a very important letter by OHA was not given to the planning commissions, which detailed why this was a bad bill. And so by the 3rd one, we went into action, and we called people from Lanai and made sure that this bill, the OHA comments got put on the record with that planning commission. And what happened was they adopted all the conditions that OHA suggested. Now, how did this happen that as this bad bill is moving forward, the reason it's bad is because it allowed for uncontrolled removal of resources from businesses, which is, they didn't need a special use permit. They didn't need a certain permit that would allow them to remove resources, or for us, it would allow them to sand mine and take sand off of this property and possibly off the island, because it called for 100,000 cubic yards of material to be removed off of the property with no oversight, no permit, which means you could do it every single day. Okay,
Claire,
and so,
let me ask you a
I'm
question.
sorry, what did you say?
I just want to, what I'm hearing that you really had to pay attention to the entire process, monitor it not only on Maui, but on Lanai and Molokai. That seems like a Herculean effort. And I'm just wondering, how did you, for example, how did you become aware of what was going on Lanai?
I happened to speak to the person from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs who wrote the letter. And he asked me what the Maui Planning Commission said. And I said, I have no idea. And you can look it up on the Planning Commission site to see what happened at the meeting, what was decided. And I did, and I saw that his letter was never presented to the Molokai or Maui.
So you're kind of checking up on what the planning department should be doing, and whether it was just an oversight or, you know, maybe, I don't know, I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, but sometimes there are things that don't happen properly. And so we as citizens have to pay attention, and we're not on the inside, so it can be a real challenge. Again, this is a basic overview of what people can do and how to get involved. And sometimes it becomes very clear that it can be very complicated, which is why I feel like we're going to have more and more of these educational webinars.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'll just take a minute to finish this story in that what happened was that bill did come back to the council. I happened to miss the reading in committee of the land use committee, and I happened to miss it. And I saw the video of it, and the council passed it unanimously. And what was said about how much material could be moved was this. Councilman Guzman said, well, I've gotten recommendations from different committees, and they said 100, and that was it. It didn't say 100,000 cubic yards of material. And the council bought it. And so they all voted for it, and it went out of committee to that famous December time when all of those different issues, all those different ordinances were brought forward at the same time. And it was amazing because we knew we had to do something. I called Councilman Guzman myself and said, what are you doing? And he never answered me before the meeting. And so we went to work in social media, bringing it forth that what he was asking for was no oversight on removing 8 Olympic-sized swimming pools of sand, 100 truckloads of sand. You know, we just went on with those visuals on the internet. And then when we came to that December meeting, when all of those things were crammed through and we were trying to be crammed through, Noelani Ahia held up a sign that said, this is what you're asking for with no oversight. We think that this is criminal. And I believe that Councilman Guzman stepped back in a little bit of embarrassment that somebody had finally picked out what had happened. What I found was, you know, those little blue letters at the bottom of the agenda item that says, the hyperlink, if you want to read more about it. When I read all of the hyperlink things, there was a letter from David Good, the Public Works Director. There was a letter from Will Spence, the Planning Director. There was the OHA letter. And all of these letters said, this is not a good idea. And somehow, all of those testimonies, which came from departments, could be ignored. So you really got to stay on top of it. You really have to stay on top of it. And then, Albert, to top it off, David Good signed the illegal permit for 213,000 cubic yards of removal of sand once again. And so to your point of the community plan protects our communities with laws and provisions. There is a provision to protect all sand dunes, and especially coastal sand dunes, which have their own ordinance, and then the inland sand dunes in particular in the Wailuku Kahului community plan. And we testified to that for all those months and wondered what happened. How come they can do that? And how come David Good could allow that permit to be renewed? And we found out from our friends at Maui Tomorrow that it was because of a ministerial permit that the minister or the public works director at this point did not have to follow the community plan if he was making a judgment call to allow this permit to go through. And that was really what we were fighting. And in the zoning code, it did not allow sand to be removed. And that still holds today. And that is what's protecting our sand at this time, is the zoning code that was ignored for decades and says you may not remove the resource off the property. So thank you for letting me tell you the story, but really the public has to be very aware of what they're bringing through and keep watch. You just have to keep watch over and over and over again to see if something has come up that is related to your item. And in this case, it was directly opposed to what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And wherever it goes and whatever it takes, as long as we keep at it, I think you can be successful.
That's quite the story, and I'm quite familiar with it myself. Not as familiar as you, but you know, it just strikes me that your average citizen doesn't have time to go and spend every day looking through all this. I mean, some people have 2 jobs, maybe 3. Personally, when I vote for a representative, whether they be a council member or a state legislator, I'm hoping that they are going to be representing me and implementing the community plan that was adopted by the people. And so when that doesn't happen, I don't feel like I'm being served well. I want to do one more thing, and we're not getting any questions on this that I can see. But when you mentioned ministerial permits, there was an ordinance that was passed in 2013, because prior to that, everything had to comply with the community plan. And there was an ordinance that said, except for ministerial permits, such as building permits, grading permits, plumbing, electrical. To me, plumbing and electrical codes, as long as you comply with those, it's fine. But I don't think that building, for example, a hotel that's permitted by zoning but is prohibited by the community plan. Let's say the community plan calls for open space. I don't think that the hotel person should just be able to go get a building permit and ignore the community plan. And I think that's something that we have to change.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more about the ministerial permits.
Yeah.
And I see that there are more ministerial oversight permits being suggested in the planning commission, planning department, sorry, with the new SMA laws, the revised SMA laws. And I think that's absolutely wrong, because I see already that some projects have been allowed to go forward and get their permits as a special exemption, and they do not comply with the SMA rules and laws.
Okay.
And I think that's something that really needs to be cleaned up.
That's for our next session, Claire.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that all of this that we're covering is, we're talking about tools that people can use to address whatever issue that they want to, whether it be affordable housing or over tourism or wetlands protection. So I just want to make sure that the people who are out there are knowing that this is intended to be a toolkit. We're using some specific examples, in this case, sand mining, and hopefully you can apply these tools. They should be applicable to almost any issue that you feel strongly about when interfacing with government.
I hope you can, just to make a quick suggestion, Albert, you might consider having a future webinar once we get charter amendments approved through council, because you know, Mike has done a really good job of getting on those charter amendment proposals early, so that I think we're going to get through them well before the deadline. Whereas last term we were right up against the deadline. We didn't even get to some of them, and some of them we couldn't make decisions on because we weren't getting quorum. So I want to thank my colleague here, Mike Molina, for for following through with his promise to start hearing the charter amendment proposals, because those are really important proposals. And if we get
Great,
them
thanks.
done early enough, we can have sessions like this where we explain them to the public, and so people do know what they're voting on when they get to the polls.
So with that, we're going to end this session and we're going to start again. Thank you for all the panelists. That was a great session.
Hey, thank you to
Mahalo.
my fellow panelists.
Mahalo. Thank you. It's great moderation, Albert.